What's up, cool people? I'm Matt Conroy, and I know this is kind of a random time for this, but this video is going to be another one I'm going to file under the, kind of scripture struggles category, as I've called them. Recently I've heard and seen a lot and had a lot of discussions on things related to heaven and hell, and in some cases specifically, about who goes to heaven or hell and that kind of stuff. And really, since I have lived here in Texas, it's somewhat been a topic of conversation quite a few times, especially as I am not a, Baptist. I'm not of any Calvinist or Reformed affiliated lines of thinking or denominations, at least not in my upbringing. And yet there's a Reformed seminary not too far from here. There's Dallas Baptist not too far. All sorts of influences from that particular branch of Christianity that are very close by. So, needless to say, lots of discussions about heaven, hell, faith, predestination, all sorts of different things like that. And I'm not going to get into all those things, but I will say that from other places, especially from other places I've lived, I've heard just a whole variety of different thoughts and perspectives from people who I know go to church and, who all are of the Christian faith broadly. But there are some things that I would like to put my perspective out there on, especially as I find myself as, somewhat moderate in this, I would say. Really, I find myself somewhat moderate on a lot of issues, a lot of discussions and things like that, but that's something that's just kind of there letting you know to keep in mind where I kind of fall along the spectrum. But when it comes to heaven and hell, first off, I am going to firmly say that yes, I certainly believe in the existence of both. Some people that I've talked to apparently don't. But I find it really hard to look at the Bible and say that heaven and hell don't exist. Or even that just hell doesn't exist. Because there are many mentions within the Bible, especially in the New Testament. Not even so much in the Old Testament. Like, a lot of Old Testament thought was just there was this area within the earth that they called the pit, or Sheol, that people went to when they died. Maybe towards the later parts of the Old Testament, you start seeing some mentions of heaven and or hell, maybe. But for the most part, it's a New Testament concept. But especially if you look at some of the things that Jesus teaches, some of his parables, as well as the book of Revelation specifically, and other prophecies within the Bible, I find it impossible to deny the existence of heaven and hell, even if, at the very least, heaven being eternity with God and hell being eternity without God. So, getting that out there right off the bat. However, digging a little more specifically into Revelation and just some of the things that it says about eternity and heaven and hell and things like that, and I got to thinking recently after hearing a few things and rereading specifically chapter 21 of Revelation that, okay, so it says there is going to be eventually a new heaven and a new earth, New Jerusalem, and things like that. Basically, everything is going to be new. And maybe I'm thinking a little too much about this and reading too much into it, but the question that came to my mind, and where I'm kind of struggling here a little bit with this, is if there's going to be a new heaven, does that mean that heaven currently is not perfect and or not what it's ultimately meant to be? Like I said, maybe I'm thinking a little too much about this, but at least for me, it kind of makes me wonder, because why would there be a need for a new heaven if current heaven is completely fine? There are a whole lot of branches of this discussion and different things that could really lengthen the conversation significantly. Especially if you take in the debate over, like, are we in the end times, and that kind of relatively new train of thought that some people seem to be taking, that they say that we are in the end times already. But I'm not going to get into that, because that's a whole nother bag of worms that I don't really want to get into right now. But assuming we're not in, like, Jesus' second coming, tribulation, like, post all of that, end times, assuming we're not currently in that state of existence, then why would there be a need for a new heaven if heaven currently is perfectly fine? And really, I guess some of my thought process on that comes down to looking at just God's plan, I guess, as a whole, and creation, and how everything from the beginning is supposed to be an outpouring or some sort of moment, some sort of spot along that path within God's plan to ultimately make everything new and bring about a whole new existence to everything. And really, I guess, I mean, obviously, or at least I would say obviously, Earth, in its current state, is not perfect. There is plenty of pain and suffering and sin, sadness, all that kind of stuff that is here on Earth that is not going to be when all things are made new. But I will say, when it comes to heaven, at least in my understanding of current heaven, there really isn't as much said in the Bible about current day heaven as there is about eventual heaven and what it will eventually be like when God's plan comes to fruition and all things are made new. Maybe my memory of those references is a bit lacking, and if so, I apologize. Feel free to leave a comment saying that I'm stupid and I'm forgetful and I'm not really noticing or paying attention to all the descriptions of current heaven, but to the best of my knowledge, a lot of what we think of, at least, that comes from Scripture, that talks about heaven, talks about end times, eventual, all things new heaven, not current day heaven. So, I mean, clearly heaven has not always been, completely utopian perfect kind of situation. Otherwise, how would you have Lucifer as one of Jesus' angels trying to usurp God? And I've realized I'm using my terms of God and references to God in various parts interchangeably. That's the complexity of the Trinity there. But anyway, I digress. How could Lucifer, as an angel in heaven, have the capacity to even think of usurping God if heaven was perfect? Now, I realize since that time, clearly there has been a massive shift in at least the relation between heaven and earth because of Jesus being born and dying on the cross and rising again and all that kind of stuff. But what does that mean, that is no longer a thing? Does that mean heaven is currently perfect? And if so, why would there need to be a new heaven? Is that reference to a new heaven in Revelation just saying that, the connection between heaven and earth will once again drastically change and it will all be a completely new thing? I don't know. But this is why I say this is why I'm filing it under the scripture struggles category, because these are things that I have not always put a whole lot of thought into or considered very heavily, and it's stuff that I'm kind of trying to sort out and think a little bit more about to kind of establish where my thought process stands in these things. And so, again, just feel free to leave a comment telling me that I'm an idiot, I'm reading too much into this, or whatever. Try not to get too harsh with the language, though, because I'm not a big fan of just bashing on people on the internet. But anyway, so I'm not even really going to give any certain thought about where I stand on that, because I haven't concluded my thoughts on this. And so, whatever you have to say, any things you can recall from your own knowledge of the Bible and anything like that, leave some comments. But yeah, so again, the ultimate question within all this is, if there's going to be a new heaven, is heaven currently perfect? I mean, maybe it's just a new relation between heaven and earth, and it's more so heaven becoming more fully established and God's kingdom being established fully on earth, and that's kind of the new connection, relation, and that's why it's called a new heaven, because it's more so existent here on earth, or I don't know. But anyway, just wanted to get that out there, because a lot of what I am trying to do with these videos and bringing up different kind of discussions and hot topics and things like that with these videos and on my channel is I want a discussion. I want feedback, input. I'm looking for, perspectives and information on these things. So, anyway, that's kind of really all the more I'm going to say about it. Because, again, I haven't really even fully found a landing spot for my thoughts on this. So, anyway, that's going to do it this time around. As always, like, share, subscribe. Just look down in the description, and you'll see all the different ways to keep up and interact with me. You can follow me, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. It's all down there. And as I've said a couple of times already, leave comments below the video with your thoughts on this particular topic, whether you think heaven and hell exist, whether you think heaven is going to change once, eternity arrives and Jesus comes again and all that happens, or if you think I'm just reading too much into it, whatever your thoughts are, or anything else you'd like me to talk about, just let me know down in the comments section. So that's it, pretty much. So I hope you're all doing well, and hopefully I will see you next time. Stay cool, people.